Perfect. And so hello, everybody. I think if it looks like we're all right, I can do my little spiel, my little intro, and then I know we're going to be ready to share it. Another screen, which is exciting. I love a visual. I'm gonna change. Okay, welcome everybody near and far via Zoom and Facebook Live to the Laurie Akuma Memorial Reading. If anybody doesn't know, I'm Megan Marshall. I'm the director of the Hugh C. Hyde Living Writers series. And tonight we are celebrating the beginning of spring with an amazing author whose work is as dazzling as a flower's first bloom. But before I invite her to begin, I do want to take a minute to thank those who have helped to make this event and this series possible. And that includes all of our friends at Love Library, Markle Tumlin, who is co-hosting with me this evening. Also want to thank Danya Muka Hall, Laurel Bliss, Jessica Savala, and Rebecca Williamson. And I'd also want to make sure that I thank our Department of English and Comparative Literature for their support tonight. And then I also want to issue a very, very special thanks to the Nagoro and Akuma families for the endowment that allows us to honor the memory of a very special SDSU MFA alumna, Laurie Matsuda Akuma, by featuring the work of a women poet or prose writer. In addition to earning her MFA, Laurie also taught at SDSU and was committed to bringing attention to women writers, specifically women writers of color, whose voices are often marginalized. So we're happy to celebrate her legacy tonight, along with her family's continued support. So just a couple reminders, if you're joining us via Zoom, please keep your mics muted during the presentation. You'll have a chance to unmute yourself and ask questions or ask questions in the chat a little bit later. And just also, as you may have heard, this event is being recorded. And lastly, please check out the Hugh C. Hyde Living Writers series on YouTube. Our channel has recordings of all of our great authors events, as well as creative responses from students who are enrolled in the Living Writers class. So basically just lots of great stuff for your viewing pleasure. And also for more information on the rest of this semester's Living Writers events, you can visit the SDSU MFA community page, and I'll put a link to that a little bit later into the chat. So without further ado, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our featured reader. Aimee Nezhukumatathil is the author of New York Times bestselling illustrated collection of nature essays and Kirkus Prize finalist, World of Wonders, in Praise of Fireflies, Whale Sharks, and Other Astonishments, which was also chosen as Barnes & Noble's Book of the Year. She has 4 previous collections of poetry, including Oceanic, Lucky Fish, At the Drive-In Volcano, and Miracle Fruit. Her most recent chapbook is Lace Pyrite, a collaboration of epistolary garden poems with the poet Ross Gay. Her writing appears twice in Best American Poetry Series and Tin House, New York Times Magazine, ESPN, Ploughshares, among other places. Her honors include a poetry fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Pushcart Prize, a Mississippi Arts Council grant, and being named a Guggenheim Fellow in Poetry. And super awesome, just this year, she became the first ever poetry editor for Sierra Magazine, which is the storytelling arm of the Sierra Club. She is professor of English and creative writing in the University of Mississippi's MFA program. As the great poet Jane Hirshfield asserts, poetry's work is not simply the recording of inner or outer perception. It makes by words and music new possibilities of perceiving. Aimee's work extends this assertion and shows us how the conflation of research narratives and carefully wrought image and metaphor can inspire new possibilities of perceiving and understanding both self and world. Possibilities of perception abound in Aimee's work, where we learn that the bibliography of the firefly is a tender and electric dress, and where we can become like the cactus wren, who hollows out a space for itself in the most uninhabitable places. And ultimately, where we're encouraged to listen, how this planet hums with so much wing, fur, and fin. Her elegant prose elucidates what it is to be a human in step with nature and celebrates our many ways of knowing and experiencing in heart, mind, voice, and body. Of Aimee's work, author Roxane Gay raves, her poems contain elegant twists of a very sharp knife. She writes about the natural world and how we live in it, filling each page with a true sense of wonder. And I think now more than ever, we all might need to immerse ourselves in some pure sense of wonderment. So please join me in welcoming Aimee Nezhukumatathil.
Megan, thank you so much. Thank you so much, those of you who are right there at San Diego State University, but really from all over here. As you can see, there's someone, did I hear that right? Someone's here from Brazil? Is that right? Is there Brazil, California, or are we talking Brazil? That's amazing. Bemidji, I have to give a shout out, Montana, lots of Venice Beach, New Mexico, Nevada. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. So excited. Blas, Falconer, hello, thank you. Well, I want to make sure that we get a jam-packed evening. I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm going to be having a drawing contest. So I want you to be prepared, even if you're like, forget this, I'm out of here. I thought this was poetry. Too bad, I have you now. So get a piece of paper, just anything you have near you. It could be scrap. We're going to be drawing something. I picked this bird for those of you here in San Diego. I picked this bird in honor of a bird that is really only found, I count it, the only place you can see this bird in the United States is actually at the world famous San Diego Zoo. There's kind of a sketchy, not healthy one in Virginia, so I'm not counting that because I think that's someone's pet, but it's the cassowary. And otherwise you would have to see, you would have to go to New Zealand to see this. So you all who are in San Diego are so lucky. The only other one that was alive, and I was actually supposed to go and interview it, was in the Atlanta Zoo, and sadly he passed away in 2020 in the summer, and also it was the pandemic, so I didn't get a chance to visit and interview this cassowary. So the only ones that are left that I consider truly cared for are the ones at the San Diego Zoo. So we're going to have that just a little bit later, and there's going to be prizes. So all you need is just a simple sheet of paper. If you don't consider yourself an artist, that's okay. None of us are. We're gonna get through this just fine. All right. I'm going to do a little bit of poems. I'm going to do a little bit of some of my nature essays, and then I'm going to leave you with a writing prompt, because I don't know about you, but it has been hard to write during the pandemic. So I'm hoping that I have a couple questions for you that hopefully that'll just unlock something, a great first line to something, maybe make you craft a metaphor that you didn't have an hour ago. So yes, here I see in the chat, Albert is like, not the killer bird. Oh yes, we're gonna draw that killer bird, the cassowary. So, all right, without further ado, I think what I will do, let me see. Let me start. I'm going to read just a few poems. This one is brand new. I've actually, I'm going to debut it here. It's actually going to be officially published Friday. So maybe I'm not supposed to share it here, but I'm going to do it anyway. I like to do something a little bit brand new for everybody. And this is called Because I Miss Restaurants So Much. I've not been to a restaurant in, over a year, not even an outside one. I'm hardcore. So I miss being in a booth, what it means to be in a booth. And this is an ode. This is called Ode to Sitting in a Booth. This will be in the Academy's Poetry a Day on Friday, so just FYI. Ode to Sitting in a Booth. It's the closest thing to a cave. I have to resist this wild urge to carve my name or a word in it. My favorite way to sit here is with cold vodka and grapefruit juice and whatever bitter concoction you're sipping. Under the table, I'll nudge you with my heels, a sign no stalactite or dripstone will stop us. Bats do not require any energy to claw dangle upside down. All they need is to relax and gravity, and there's plenty of both swirling here to go around. How loud this bar, within these three walls, we can drop straight into an electric flight. We can pretend we don't answer to anyone, including the waitress, and no one even knows where we are. I am, can you all, what are you afraid of? I feel like the two questions I feel like I'm asking my students a lot these days are two things. What do you love? And then what are you afraid of? So I want to hear for right now, there's going to be so much love in the rest of this hour, but for right now, what are you afraid of? Maybe you're afraid of
You
cassowary.
just don't get it, Mario.
Can you, and can you put that in the chat? Like, what are you afraid of? What phobia do you have? I may have mentioned this if you've seen me read before. My mother is a former psychiatrist. She's retired now, but in the 80s, we used to get these kind of, it looked like a phone book. It was that year's booklet of phobias that were diagnosed during that year. And, you know, we didn't really have literature in the house. We had a bunch of medical textbooks and I think a few nature books, but really my parents were just like, go to the library, go to the library. But when this book came, it was like the Sears catalog. I mean, my younger sister and I, we couldn't wait to look through it because it would be things like fear of peanut butter, fear of the Pope, fear of spiders, of course, any diagnosed fear that had been treated somewhere in the country was there listed in a hard copy of a booklet. They stopped doing that, but they still have it actually up. It's called thephobialist.com. And if you haven't checked this out, do look at it just to see like what all the different kinds of phobias that are out there. This one is actually, I stumble over it just a little bit because I included the longest word in the Oxford English Dictionary in this poem. And the title of this poem is a phobia itself. And it goes, hepatomonstроsis capitalophobia, which is the fear of long words. On the first day of classes, I secretly beg my students, don't be afraid of me. I know my long last name on your semester schedule is chopped off or probably misspelled or both. I can't help it. I know the panic
go to bed.
rubbed up against each other, no room for vowels marked instructor. You want something to really startle you? Try tapping the ball of roots of a potted tomato plant into your cupped hand one spring, only to find a small black toad kicking his cold eye at you, the sun, or a gnat. Be afraid for the x-rays of your teeth or your lungs. Pray for no dark spots. You may have, okay, here we go. This is the longest word in the English language. You may have pneumono ultra microscopic silicovolcanoconiosis or coal lung. Be afraid of money spiders tiptoeing across your face while you sleep on a sweet, fat couch. But don't be afraid of me, what language I speak, my last name, or what accent dulls itself on my molars. I promise I will tell jokes. I will help you see the gleam of the beak of a mohawked cockatiel. I will lecture on luminescent sweeps of ocean full of tiny dinoflagellates using green light when disturbed. I promise dark gatherings of toadfish and comical shrimp just when you think you are all alone, hoping to stay somehow afloat. And I'm going to read just one last poem and then I'm going to switch gears to essays. And what are these phobias here? I was seeing one out of the corner of my eye. I was trying not to crack up. And, you know, I know. So what I would say is, and here I just said I was going to crack up. What I tell my students is phobias are not funny, but also we're human. So here, for example, eating spoiled food, heights, there's, you know, come on, the peanut butter one is a little bit funny, right? But I would say, what I would say to that is if you're going to write from the point of view of someone who has a phobia that you don't actually have, what I would just encourage you to do is always just err on the side of kindness. So meaning like definitely you can, you know, be lighthearted about someone who has a phobia of peanut butter, for example, but I would say don't make them like the butt of a joke. You know what I mean? Like don't, like it's like I'm afraid of actually I don't like frogs all that much. I'm not really afraid of them, but I would get nervous if there was a frog in my room, for example. So it's okay to be lighthearted about it, but don't make them feel like they, are subhuman somehow because they have that phobia. Because whatever it means out there in this list is that someone out there was brave enough to say, hey, I have a problem with this. I would like to be treated, even if it's peanut butter, even if it's frogs or something like that. So that's what I would say is there's so many, I mean, the booklet is like this, it was this big hard copy. There's so many phobias out there, but I would just say err on the side of kindness. Okay. Imagine a loved one, for example, having that phobia. All right. And the last one I will read, the last poem I will read is, did anybody see The Queen's Gambit this summer? I feel like, what is time? I feel like Queen's Gambit was last month, but I think that was this summer on Netflix. I have my concept of time is completely messed up. So I wrote this way before The Queen's Gambit came out. This is my ode to chess. I just assumed that chess was never in the cards for me. It was never going to, it always looked cool. I always loved the concentration, but I could not understand the basic kind of rules until one day. So this is a love poem called Chess. Exactly 4 different men have tried to teach me how to play. I could never tell the difference between a rook and bishop, but I knew the horse meant knight. And that made sense to me because a horse is night. Soot, hoof, and nostril, dark as a sabled evening with no stars, bats, or moon blooms. It's a night in Ohio where a man sleeps alone one week, and the next, the woman he will eventually marry leans her body into his for the first time, leans a kind of faith too, filled with white crickets and bouquets of wild carrot. And the months and the honeyed years after that will make all the light and dark squares feel like tiles for a kitchen they might one day build together. Every turn, every sacrificial move, all the decoys, the castling, the deflections, these will be both riotous and unruly, the exact opposite of what she thought she ever wanted in the end game of her days. All right. Thank you so much. I want to switch gears just a little bit, and we're switching to nonfiction here. And it has been to say that the last really, I think a lot of people say 2020 has been traumatic. The truth of it is actually a lot of us have been in this kind of state of trauma for far longer than that. So I don't want to discount that. But like Walt Whitman, who says, do I contain multitudes? Very well, I contain multitudes. I think that you can absolutely be aware of pain and suffering and feel despair. And I believe that you can also try to make this world a better place, or try to craft and make a world on the page that you want to be in, that you hope for the future. I don't think you have to make a choice one way or the other. And so that's kind of the lens that I'm looking at when I put together my book, World of Wonders, it started from a list of 200 plants and animals that I loved, and I really whittled it down to 30. And that was super hard, super difficult. And the litmus test I had for that was I needed every animal and plant in this book to be something that I could talk to my, at the time, 6 and 9-year-old about, but also to my best friend, to my husband, to my parents, and to a complete stranger that I would like to be my friend. Those were the people that I kind of was envisioning reading this. And so if I felt one of those groups would not care or would not be interested, that plant or animal was gone. It doesn't mean I don't love that animal or plant. It just means I wanted to be on fire to talk about these plants or animals. So that was that was a hard thing to do, because I would say like, goodbye, blanket octopus, goodbye, to this so-and-so, so many creatures of the sea, which I love so much. But I really wanted it to be like the 30 most, what I thought were the most contagious animals and plants, contagious enthusiasm that I had for it. And what I mean by that is I started this project a long time ago, but it was always kind of on the back burner because life happens. I had 2 kids. I moved my family down below the Mason-Dixon line. But something happened in 2016, or rather someone happened in 2016, where my then 6-year-old, and and I don't want to assume that we all believe the same thing and stuff, but I hope that I could at least speak to your common sense of humanity here. That I had to tell my 6-year-old was asking me, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he came from school one day and said, "Mommy, what does grab her by the pee mean?" And I will never ever forgive that man for, and I don't believe in hiding things from my children, but to have that conversation at 6 is way sooner than I ever expected. And then to not even it was all in the same month, my then 9-year-old came home and said, "Mom, I heard someone at lunch say build that wall," and they were all talking about Pedro, one of his best friends. What does build that wall mean, and why would they say it to Pedro and not me? And you can imagine inside I was just like crumpling. This is 6 and 9 years old. And I don't, and I felt this way before I had kids. I would volunteer and teach kids in kindergarten how to make metaphors and things like that. Kids are filled with so much love. They actually have to learn or parrot back what they hear of hate. You can't convince me otherwise. I've been around too many kids since I was 18 years old. And that I never wanted kids of my own. But I was just so amazed at the metaphors they make, and they're so full of love and they're so full of caring. So I will never, I don't even remember what I told my kids at that point. I'm sure I stumbled over it. I'm sure I was not as elegant of a earth mother as I wanted to be. But the one thing I did is that night, and that's why I remember so well how this book came together, is that I'm not a political scientist, I'm not a scientist, but what I could do is make metaphors. And what I could do is write about the things that I loved on this planet as a record for my 6 and 9-year-old child to see. I don't know what else they would be bombarded with, but they would at core have a Word document of the things that their mother loved so much. And I wanted it to be also a record then of how much they were loved as well. So I didn't have any visions that this was going to be a book or anything like that. I just knew that I had to write this. I had to stop futtering around, Aimee. I need to kind of get this in. So that's what I did. My response to all that vitriol and all that fear mongering and all the just kind of the ugliness was to write towards love. And in revision, that's when I was starting to think of, okay, how would I write this plant or this animal if I was talking to my best friend? How would I write about this if I was talking to a friend that I don't have yet, but I want to make a friend, that kind of thing. And that's really what it came down to. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life, because I will tell you that I also never saw anything like it before. I never saw a book about the outdoors featuring anybody that remotely looked like me. I grew up in the 80s and 70s, and the character I identified with the most, not because of her power, but simply because she had black hair, was Linda Carter's Wonder Woman. It's literally, that was the only brunette that I saw. Oh, and I think there was a Mandrell sister. If you watch the Mandrell show, those of you who are in the 70s would know that. Some of you, do you remember? It's not Barbara. Who's Barbara's sister that had brunette hair? Those were the 2 brunettes that I saw regularly on TV, Cher. But no Asian Americans, definitely no Asian Americans. And if there was, Louise, yes, cousin, yes, Louise Mandrell. Oh my goodness. Now we know who is the Generation X and up there. Yeah, anyway, so I had so many editors tell me, there's no trauma in here. There's no trauma. You're not addicted to anything. Nobody died majorly in your family. They were like looking, they were like, did you have an aunt or an uncle? They actually asked that, like as if I could mine somehow from my family tree and manufacture trauma in this book for it to sell. And I didn't want that. It's not like I have a perfect, happy-go-lucky life, but I wanted this to be a record of things that I loved. So that's really what it came down to. And I never thought, and then the pandemic hit. So I thought, well, that was great. Nice knowing you, book. I guess we'll start on the next project, that kind of thing. But the most miraculous thing happened is that independent bookstores in particular were the essential workers. They pushed books and reading, and people started reading. So they would tell their friend, and their friends would tell their friends. It was just amazing. My book had not been available on Amazon from Black Friday until just last week. So all of these things happening was without the behemoth, and Amazon's icky anyway, but through no help of Amazon whatsoever. So I just want to give a special shout out to librarians and bookstores who really, they did the work of getting this book into people's and patrons' hands. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen and do a quick little PowerPoint, but I promise it'll be fun. This is, if you can, let me see here. Get out your piece of paper if you don't have it already. And what I want to show you real quick is just a couple of the, this is the POTU. This is what I'm going to be reading from today. This is one of my favorite birds, and I wanted to show you. This is the adult size version of the POTU. Looks like he's had a little too much Mountain Dew. And this is the baby version. This is a mama, and this little white one this is them. They're camouflage. They're meant to just kind of look like they blend in to a tree stump. So they're one of the only birds that don't actually make a nest. They just hang out on a tree because nobody bothers them. I'm going to skip ahead. What I also was so thrilled with Milkweed about is that they were the only press that did not flinch for a moment when I said I wanted this to kind of be a callback to those textbooks and science books from the 70s and 80s that only had like one color in them. And they let me choose an Asian American illustrator, which was very important to me because I never saw names like Nezhukumatathil or Nakamura in any books about the outdoors, that kind of thing. They didn't even flinch. So I'll always be indebted to them for that. These are two of the animals that are in there. And now here we go. Here's the contest, folks. This is what a cassowary looks like. This is actually from the website of the San Diego Zoo. So you have this living, breathing thing right next to you, those of you in San Diego. I want you to go ahead, like while I'm reading, I want you to start at least the sketch of it. And this is the only thing that I could come up with on the internet in terms of like a how-to. So here's a little quick, it's a little sketchy if it's called drawingtutorials101.com. It's suddenly like, make this shape, make this one, a whole bunch of shapes, and then boom, you have a cassowary. I don't know, whatever floats your boat. As long as it is discernible as a cassowary, I want the most creative drawing. And I will give you till 5 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow. All you need to do is tag me on Twitter or find me on Instagram, take a picture, post it, and I will give you my actual favorite. It's like a 20 pack of my very favorite drawing pens. It's a rainbow collection. I'll send that right to you and probably throw in some poetry goodies as well. So, but it needs to be posted by 5 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, so I'm not going to do, this is like the saddest little tutorial ever. So I'm going to go right back to drawing from life as close as possible. And then I'm going to read to you just a little selection from POTU, and then I will take some questions. Sorry, this book is still so new. I had a Post-it note in here. I still don't have the page numbers memorized. Here we go. Also, I wanted to tell people that I am no ornithologist. I'm going to be making some bird calls in here that I know are not what many ornithologists say are correct. I don't know what else to tell you except for the fact that they work for me. I have witnesses in every state that I've lived in, but they work and I can call birds to my yard. You'll see what I mean in just a little bit, but I'm trying to avoid the bird splainers who might email me and say, that's not correct. I know it's not correct. All right, so here we go. The potu. In Mississippi, summer means mosquito. It also means tomatoes. It means mosquito. Let me see, I'm going to stop the share. It means peaches. It means humidity. It means strawberries. It means more mosquitoes and mostly mosquitoes. I counted 5 while sitting here on my deck, having a coffee at 7:30 in the morning. What I wouldn't do to have just a little potu bird or 3 in my backyard to catch those bloodthirsty beasties. And I want to show you, this is Fumi Nakamura's drawing of the potu. Alas, the potu only resides in Central and South America, where it gobbles up the said mosquitoes and termites. When fully grown, potus are a little over a foot tall, with thick necks and giant yellow eyes that look like they've just witnessed a glass-spattered car crash. Their toes and their tarsi are a brilliant yellow too, but it's the traffic light eyes that people remember the most. Some people refer to this bird as little more than a flying mouth and eyes, but potus are pretty much masters of disguise in the humid jungles of the Southern Hemisphere. Potus are nocturnal and so confident of their camouflaging skills, they just sleep right out in the open daylight. They close their giant eyes, tilt their head towards the tree, and position their cryptic feathers just so to resemble a broken tree branch that even the sharpest eye struggles to discern what is tree and what is bird. Only a feather ruffle of wind betrays otherworldly stillness of this bird. Even when they are hungry, they simply wait for insects to fly close and then dart out and return to their home branch with their catch. For a bird famous for its stoic stillness, the potu's call would sound comical if it didn't sound so scary. Now, if your eyes were closed, you would never imagine it came from such a soft-looking creature. But the call is what you would get if you combined a tiger roar with a frog croak, if both animals were in severe gastrointestinal distress. For example, if I was in a Brazilian rainforest and heard this cry, I might imagine it was going to be my last day on this planet. That's how chilling and terrifying the potu cry is. Stephen Hilty's book, Birds of Venezuela, describes it as, quote, a fairly loud, gruff, okay, here we go. Ooh-ah. I can't even do it. Descending somewhat. In other words, it sounds like the retching sound of a human. Basically, the stuff of nightmares. Perhaps the reason the potu leads such a motionless, solitary life is to balance its audacious call. There's a time for stillness, but who hasn't also wanted to scream with delight at being outdoors? Like the potu, I grew up wanting to blend in my case with blonde counterparts. And why would I know anything else? I felt most seen in my childhood, not by any television shows or movies, but rather when I was in the outdoors, in forests or fields, by lake or ocean. I learned to be still from watching birds. If I wanted to see them, I had to mimic their stillness, to move slow in a world that wishes us brown girls to move fast. I learned how to call cardinals and have whole conversations with them when I was 6. One of the earliest presents I can remember getting from my father is a cardinal-shaped water whistle. If I filled it with water and blew into the plastic straw of its exaggerated tail, I could mimic the distinctive hurdy-gurdy, 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 gurdy-gurdy, 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 hurdy-hurdy, gurdy-gurdy. That call of the cardinal so well, I could bring cardinals to the edge of our yard, wondering just what in the world I had to say to them. These conversations were a secret I kept even from my husband until late one spring day when he came home from work, only to find me in the backyard having a lengthy discussion with a riled up red cardinal and his mate. Both birds perched just above my head, had seemed to enjoy our talk, but then their metallic chirps sounded more and more insistent, and I have to admit, I must have answered back a little glibly, and then poof, they burst from the tree and ended our talk right then and there. When I turned around, my husband's mouth was frozen open. Reader, we had been married over a decade, and this was the first time he'd seen me have this kind of conversation. I'm certain it's not any magic in my mouth, no special twist of tongue only I have unlocked, but I think it's the quiet way you settle into the crook of a tree trunk, the still and slow down of your heart in a world that wants us to be quick and move on to the next thing. The secret in talking to birds is in the steadiness of each limb as you make your way into their territory, in the deliberateness of each movement and bend of tree and grass blade. And just like the potu, who was rewarded for her stillness by having her lunch practically fly right to her mouth, perhaps you could try a little tranquility, find a little tenderness in your quiet. Who knows what feathered gifts await? And I'll end there. Thank you so much.
Thank Aimee. Feel free to unmute yourself so she can hear a real clap. I feel like we're missing that.
So yeah, I always feel guilty. I have a little rescue chihuahua in the next room. He cannot stand those bird calls because he knows what it means for him is that cardinals, when we're outside, cardinals start coming towards him and he's just a wreck, you know, so you can't see this or hear it, but he's pacing outside my office, breathing heavily, you know, wanting to protect me from these cardinals. So anyway, yeah. So I guess I'll just open it up to questions, but I wanted to see like, how are we doing here with the cassowary drawings? Does anyone have, are they coming along? Are they coming along? You can finish them up later. Can we do the thing? Can we all put ourselves on gallery view? And then can you flip over what you have so far? Again, I won't judge now. I'm gonna judge them tomorrow at 5. I just wanna see these cassowaries, what we have here so far. Let me see here. Oh, Barbara, that's beautiful. I love that. Louise, so cute. Oh, I want that on a t-shirt. Oh, great. Let me see. Anna, very nice. Megan, hey, you've got that cask. You got that cask going on. Michael, I didn't see yours. Can you hold yours up again one more time? Oh, very cool, very cool. Keep working, keep working. I want to see color. Oh, look at this baby, Genevieve. Beautiful. If you guys can't see Genevieve, keep, you know, switch the screen till you see her. Suda, that's beautiful. Both of you guys are just nailing that cask on the head. Rebecca, oh my gosh, hold the phone, look at Rebecca. She broke out the coloring pencils here. That's almost not fair. It's so beautiful. The cassowary is that bright blue. So nice. I love this so much. Well, keep going, and then post them. I can't wait to see. And I just also, can I just say, I love knowing that we're all drawing cassowaries together, you know, somewhere like across the country. I love that so much. So if you get a chance, once lockdown is kind of lifted and stuff like that, next time you get to the San Diego Zoo, go and say hi to that cassowary for me. I have yet to meet him and I'm dying to. That's one of my bucket list items post pandemic. We'll see.
Thank you, yeah, so much, Aimee. I'm putting that on one of my first few things now after my full vaccination, going to see the cassowary. So I know that y'all probably have some questions for Aimee. So if you could maybe try to use the little hand raise function in Zoom and or throw it into the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as possible in the time that we have allotted to us. So I think the first one I saw up was Jake. So Jake, if you want to, there you go.
Yeah, hi, Aimee. Thanks for taking my question. I've been having a tremendous amount of distractions on the day-to-day, including construction and whatever. And so I guess my question is, how do you deal with writer's block, and how do you not get the self-recrimination of having the writer's block become a further writer's block? Thank you so much.
Such a good question. Oh, I love that, Jake. And yeah, and then add to that we're in a pandemic. So it's just so hard. It's the hardest. I will also tell you, in case it helps anybody, that I've written the least amount of new work since last March. But but I'm also learning every day. I'm trying to learn that to be gentle with myself, again, because we are in a global pandemic, not just like a California state pandemic. We're in a global pandemic right now. So the fact that, the fact that we're making anything at all is amazing. I bow down to all of you, especially the students in here who are making deadlines, turning things in. I just bow down to you so much. The kind of the easy answer, Jake, is that it's not, it is definitely a practice, and it is not something that just comes naturally. I will tell you that there are many times, especially if I make the mistake of checking my phone first thing, which I try not to do, any something on the news will just send me into most likely just despair, that kind of thing. But I will say, I asked, actually, this actually is a perfect little segue into, I asked you all to type in where you're tuning in from, and I got wonderful questions from all over, lots in California, but actually kind of some all over the Western Hemisphere. And I would say that, so that's where you're coming from. And something, the kids of immigrants and stuff, maybe you yourself have had this too. Maybe you've all heard, growing up, I heard a lot of this, mainly directed to my parents, but I was standing right there with them. Stuff like, go back to where you came from, that kind of thing. I've had it said to me. And if I wasn't so scared, I would the sassy part of me would say, you mean Chicago, Illinois, that kind of thing. So you all tell me where you're from, but here's the prompt that I would say that I haven't had anybody not be able to write from this. And I would say, so to take that statement, go back to where you came from, and to turn it into something kind of a positive question to answer. I don't know if it'll be a poem, an essay, a story, or what, but I'll put it on here, is to go back, I can type, go back to where you grow from. And I'm putting in all caps. Go back to where you grow from, meaning, maybe if it's all the way back when you were 5 years old or something, like one of the, again, dealing with kids, again, one of their first words that they learn to say is, look, wow, look at that. Wow, look at the moon. Wow. So think of you as that kid where just everything was kind of dazzling. And go back to where you grow from, not just where you're surviving. Like, I think we're all just surviving and hanging on right now, but where is that moment where you are thriving? So, and try to answer it in a metaphor. So for example, if I were to answer it today, I grow from the center of a tulip cup or something like that, climbing out a little bit pollen dusted, waiting for my transportation of a bumblebee or something like that. That's cheesy, don't use that. But maybe where you grow from is underneath the stars in Missouri, on a blanket underneath the stars in Missouri. Like, see if you can answer that. So I asked earlier, like, to ask yourself, what do you fear? And there was all kinds of phobias there. But here's that question, and I don't think anybody has a problem answering this. What do you love? I mean, that was really the prompt that started my entire book, is to write what you love, or to write towards love, even if you're not feeling it. I know there's some days harder than others. But I love that, Hannah, right there. I grow from the dew-covered prairie grasses of northern Illinois. What? That's beautiful. Hannah, by the way, that's better than anything I've written this week. And also, take a look at that, from George to belatedly under the stars in Ashland, Oregon. I love that. These are all, like, if you answer that in a poem or an essay, those are great first sentences. Those are great first lines. Like, I grow from blank. How would you answer that? Today will be something different than tomorrow's answer, but that's what I call low stakes writing. Just give yourself low stake writing assignments. Doesn't have to be a poem. Just see if you can answer that one question. What do you love? Where do you grow from? And then maybe next week it becomes a poem. Maybe 2 weeks from now it becomes a poem, but at least you made something that wasn't there before. And if still the words aren't coming, to be a poet means to make. Maybe you're going to make a peach galette. Maybe you're going to make a garden plot out of something that was all rocky before. That's fine. we are in a pandemic. So I just, I want us to be gentle with ourselves and to kind of take that burden off. Obviously, turn in your homework and pay attention to deadlines. Those of you who are in the MFA program and stuff like that, but see if you can get down low stakes work, writing. And what I mean by that is I have a 50-cent notebook, and it's my what I call sky journal. I'm writing that in the chat right there. If you don't have one, this is a pandemic project that everybody can have. It costs 50 cents. All you need is a pencil and a single subject notebook. I know many of you can't go outside or don't have the ability to go outside, so all you need is a window and a 50-cent notebook. There are 12 kinds of clouds on this planet. See if you can teach yourself, and you guys, those of you who live in San Diego, have such beautiful skies and stuff like that. See if you could teach yourself 3 clouds. Can you teach yourself 3 clouds? Sketch what you see, look out the window, sketch what you see. I don't care if you're a good artist or anything like that. And then say, oh, is that a nimbus cloud? Are those cirronimbus clouds? What is that? Maybe you can teach yourself 5. Maybe the next week you can teach yourself 9 types of clouds. It's the nerdiest party trick ever, but it's something that betters yourself, and who knows, you can use it in your writing sometime, that kind of thing. These are what I call low stakes writing, meaning you are paying attention to something. You might be able to make a metaphor out of it. You might not. It might be 2 months from now. It might be next year. But at least you will have learned something about this planet that you didn't know before. So 50 cents, make a sky journal. It'll be the best pandemic project kind of thing that you have. If you're not a baker, you can't, you're not a good runner or anything like that, everybody can look at clouds. So try to record what you see there.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Aimee. I feel, well, firstly, I just love the idea of kind of taking such a vitriolic, negative, xenophobic statement that, like go back to where you came from, and really flipping that and reclaiming it as to go back to where you grow from as a writing prompt. And also just the idea of, sort of these low stakes things in a time where we're all so stressed, I think are just some wonderful ways to keep us writing and to keep kind of that inspiration in our periphery. All right, so let's see. I think Melanie was next in terms of a hand up with a question.
Hi, Aimee. I just want to say, first of all, I love your earrings, and thank you so much for being here. I just want to say, first of all, I've read your book, World of Wonders, and you wrote in POTU about kind of wanting to blend in with your blonde counterparts and seeing yourself primarily in the outdoors. And as a fellow Asian American writer that's also a woman, I completely relate to that, and I think is also very pertinent subject right now with the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans. And so, growing up as a reader, it's always been difficult to find myself in books. And I'm curious to know what your experience was like as a reader, but also as a writer, how you approach that, and if at all, if it has influenced your writing at all.
Yeah, such a great question. And thank you so much for reading so carefully and stuff like that. I touched upon this a little bit earlier, and I guess I would say, so I have a long answer to that, and I'll try to make it short, but I want to make sure that I get to it because I think it's a very important question. I grew up with having a character named Long Duck Dong be the only kind of Asian American, if you guys know what I'm talking about, from 16 Candles. Anytime the stereotypical character spoke, there's literally a Chinese like gong sound from him. So I was taught from a very, and I was laughing with my friends, and but something also felt really icky inside, and I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't know that it was a terrible depiction. All I know is something didn't seem right, and everybody was laughing, so I learned to kind of laugh along with it. And when I, and at the time, now children's literature is so vibrant. You have Matt De La Pena, who's on your faculty. He's a good reason why the children's literature is so vibrant. But back when I was growing up, when Matt and I were growing up, I was just so not interested in kids lit. It would be like Jane went to the store and Jane would be blonde. Jane bought a balloon. Jane went home. Jane lost the balloon. Oh no, Jane. I was like, who cares about Jane? Take me to the volcanoes. I want to see, so my parents would drop me off at the library at the children's section. I was so bored. I went to the science section and I wanted to know about people who fell into volcanoes. I wanted to know about women shark scientists, things like that, things where there was action, danger. Every time though, when I got to the back of the book, I was always so disappointed to see nobody that looked like me. Rarely, if ever, did I see a woman, but I still read them. And I hold these authors very dear and near to my heart. John Muir, Thoreau, Rachel Carson, Annie Dillard. These are the classics, but it did tell me something. I don't know if I could have put it into, in fact, I know I couldn't have put it into words, but it was telling me that, combined with pop culture, which I consumed so much. Yes, Barbara in the chat, I said Eugenie Clark. Oh, one of my heroes, female woman shark scientist, so amazing. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. I got so excited about the shark scientist. I got so disappointed when I saw nobody that looked like me. But I realize now that between that and pop culture telling me you just don't exist, or there's no room for you outside. So what that told me as someone who was thinking I was going to be pre-med is that don't stay in your lane. It was saying stay in your lane, just be a doctor, because that's where anybody that had remote success that was ever depicted, they were either a doctor or long duck dong. There was no in between. Maybe there might be like an Asian villain, twirling their teeny little mustache, that kind of thing. But that was kind of it. And I never kind of could understand why. I loved being outdoors. Outdoors was a place of refuge for my family. That was the one place where nobody made fun of my parents' accent. Nobody was telling my parents to go back to where you came from when we were hiking, or when we were in the garden, or even when we were in a nursery selecting plants. My parents are master gardeners. That was the one place where I could just see them blossom and be more confident. Nobody would say like, speak English, I don't understand you. Nobody would make fun of my parents' clothing. And I was one of those kids who thought my parents were the most glamorous, most beautiful people. And I'm so ashamed that I would let some like cruddy fourth grader try to teach me otherwise, I guess what I would say then, in terms of sitting down to write with all of that weighing on my shoulders, is that 2016 happened, and I wanted to be sure, even if I hadn't seen it before. And by the way, I also want to make it clear, I'm not the first Asian American writer to write about the outdoors. I point back to teachers, I point back to the publishing world, that we're not taking the chance on Asian American nature writers, so that's on them, because they were out there, they were just not getting attention, for whatever reason. And when I sat down, I just was like, I have to write what I want to be in existence. I'm going to butcher it, but Toni Morrison, I think, said, write the book you wish you had when you were growing up. And this was the book that I wished, complete with illustrations and everything. So it's a lot easier said than done. I'm not going to lie, it took, a good 10 years to kind of make this through. But I had to kind of push on and say, I want this to be. And so that's anything. For me, it was race. If it's socioeconomic background, if it's you don't see yourself represented from your sexuality or your physical abilities, write that story, write that poem into existence. And teachers, if you are teaching anything about the outdoors and you don't have a single Native American on your syllabus, that is kind of crazy, kind of ridiculous right now. It is 2021, not 1951. And, I think there's room for other viewpoints of the outdoors now more than ever, you know. And I will tell you, my white husband who grew up in Kansas is the first person to agree with that he feels shortchanged because the only nature writing he saw when he was growing up in Kansas was white male older writers, you know. So it's not just, oh, so that I connect with people like you, Melanie, who are Asian American. It's so that we become better humans. I purposely included things like the cassowary or the axolotl, things that maybe people weren't familiar with or who hadn't seen them face to face, along with things like the monarch butterfly, because my hope is that we should be able to care about things without having direct interactions with them. So yeah, sorry, that was a big answer, Melanie, but that's such a good question. Thank you. What else? Let me see. Anna, you've been so patient with your hand up. How about you?
Hi, sorry, I didn't know if you had said Hannah or Anna.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna, my bad. But it could be either. Let's go with Hannah and then we'll
Okay.
go with Anna second. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Anna, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if you could talk more about your collaboration with Ross Gay and Matthew LaPena, and what kind of things that has done for your career, and also for the collaboration.
I love the question, but it's so hard for me to talk about what has it done for my career. But what I can tell you is that because I don't even I totally appreciate the question. I get what you're asking, but I don't even it's hard for me to even answer that. But what I will say is that what it does for me as a human and as a writer is that those times I will speak first with the Ross Gay collaboration, one of my dearest poet friends, the poet Ross Gay. If you don't know his work, you should definitely look him up. He's one of the few letter writers in the poetry world, and we did not start to say, hey, let's write poems together. It was absolutely just we were writing letters to each other during a time, Jake, where both of us kind of had let's say a fallow moment. I don't want to say writer's block, but a fallow moment. Neither of us were writing a whole lot. And, but I found that knowing that someone would be on the receiving end of sending a letter, like an actual snail mail letter, and receiving it and then responding to it kind of gave me some deadlines. So I would even just say like postcards, that's actually a great fix for just knocking you into getting in the habit of writing. You could absolutely do one postcard a week. And who doesn't like to get snail mail, you know? But I feel that there's also like a push-pull between not knowing, you know, it's like the best of getting letters and sending letters. You don't know what's coming at you, and then you have to respond to it. So it kind of shook me out of my what I would consider my usual metaphor making, and then kind of have to respond to, say, one of Ross's metaphors and stuff like that. My collaboration with Matt was different in that this one I knew from the beginning. It was commissioned by the magazine I used to work for. Actually, I still work for them. I'm a contributing editor now, but I'm the former poetry editor of Orion magazine. And they were trying to reach out to pairs of writers especially in the early on in the pandemic. And that one, there was no pressure for, I'm only speaking for myself, but no pressure to put those into poems. It was just going to be kind of correspondence, almost like writing postcards, like, here's what's going on in my neck of the woods in Mississippi. And then Matt would say, here's what's going on with his family in San Diego, you know, and back and forth. And just also just how we were responding to the pandemic. So I think even just, if you have someone from a grad program or a friend, or it doesn't even have to be a writer, someone that you can guarantee getting a response from, send that person a postcard, send that person a letter. You never know what you're going to get back. And then you don't even have to tell them you're writing a poem from it or you're writing an essay from it. You can just say like, hey, ask some questions. And actually I do this exercise where it's 3 things. Try to describe something as a color not found in a Crayola crayon box. So for example, instead of saying, oh, the sky is pink, you would say the sky is the color of the inside of a frog's lung. That's definitely not a crayon. That would be a horrifying crayon, I think. And then one statement about your body, something, even if it's something like my knee is acting up today, that's fine. And then something about the outdoors. So 3 things. That's about basically all you can fit in a postcard. But if you can make a habit of doing that, it's that noticing again. I feel like that is like already, it's like, I'm roller skating a lot now during the pandemic. It's like going out there and doing kind of like your skating exercises, doing the drills, so that, you know, I haven't been on skates before the pandemic since I was basically 15. And it was, I will say, very hard to get back on skates, but now it's like I'm relearning it all over again because I have that constant practice. So if you're not writing full poems, if you're not writing full drafts, see what happens when you write a postcard to somebody. But save it, like write it in your notebook too before you send it out. Otherwise you'll be like, wait a minute, I forgot what I just said. Yeah, good. Now, Hannah, how about you?
Hannah, don't, forget to unmute yourself.
Don't be
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm
Annoying, man.
Oh.
You have no compassion.
Hold
Chloe,
on.
come on, get ready.
Oh, wait, we gotta, someone unmuted.
There we go.
I know, the perils of Zoom.
I know. All right, go ahead, Hannah.
All right,
Hey,
sorry, Hannah.
so sorry about that. I had an issue with my mic, but thank you so much again, Aimee, for coming. Really appreciate it. And honestly, I loved reading your work. I read World of Wonders, and it was incredible. I actually I did really enjoy reading it, and I was just wondering, because you do touch so much about identity throughout your book, and I did really appreciate seeing those little nods to Chicago, Illinois. I'm from Chicago. I grew up like the first 17, 18 years of my life in the northern suburbs. So yeah, like I had mentioned in the chat, but that nod towards like mosquitoes and you know, I definitely resonated with that. But I was also wondering if you know, besides using this book to kind of reflect upon your identity and growing up and, you know, share your identity with, you know, the rest of society, do you also consider yourself, you know, an environmentalist, you know, someone who's, you know, trying to utilize these wonders to, you know, hopefully evoke environmental change and, you know, provide some awareness to your readers about like the things worth preserving?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I know that there are many times where I fail, you know, but that's the goal. My goal is to help. I'm not even so sure that I necessarily want to convert anybody, you know, necessarily, but my hope is that I'm reminding people what it's like to care for somebody besides themselves, frankly. And, you know, here in the South, they have this saying, you catch more flies with honey. So I definitely did not want to write a book that said, this is how you should live and you should listen to me, a poet, you know, that kind of thing. But my hope is, and this is actually very much inspired by Rachel Carson, who said, and I'm going to butcher this too, but the gist of it is like, the more we get to know about the inhabitants of the planets, the less likely we'll have an appetite for destruction. And I love that so much. That's on the top of all of my syllabi, whether or not I'm teaching nature writing, or even if it's just regular old poetry writing, it's the more we get to know about the inhabitants of the planets, the less appetite we have for destruction. And I think that's so true. You know, I mean, knowing that, oh, that patch of trees over there, first of all, is catalpa trees. And in those catalpa trees are blue warblers, not just random birds. And those blue warblers take note of a red spotted salamander, and those salamanders use the stars to navigate their home. My hope is that instead of just saying, oh, that piece of forest there, my hope is that your heart softens a little bit. You know, my hope is that when you realize that there's a salamander that's pink and it looks like he has a smile, but his skin can regenerate and regenerate and regenerate, you'll want to, and he's already extinct basically from the wild, and that's the axolotl. My hope is that you'll be more aware of the next time you, I don't know, toss trash somewhere that's not a receptacle for it. I mean, it's absolutely all connected. And to say that we're not connected to an axolotl because I've never seen one, or I don't need to care about a cassowary because it's on the other side of this planet, is such a grotesque way of thinking. And it's one that has been promoted by this weird, hateful, and absolutely unnatural rhetoric, which is us first, we're great, and nobody else is great, just we are great. That's not how nature works, folks. Nature is all connected and we depend on each other, not just, oh, whatever I can do to make myself and me and mine just succeed. That's absolutely not the world that I want to live in. And actually, the world will fall apart if that's how everybody thinks. But take it from nature, don't take it from me. We are all connected with each other. We all depend on each other. And any kind of rhetoric between humans that says otherwise is so grotesque to me. It's so gross. It's absolutely not natural. So anyway, that's kind of a bigger answer. I'm probably speaking to the choir here on a lot of that, but it is very unnatural. You see so many instances in the animal world of, an animal being orphaned by its mother while it was still nursing, and another animal entirely comes over and takes care of it. That's what animals do. We should be able to be a little bit more evolved than animals. You know what I mean? So I think it's definitely all connected. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. What else? McKenna? Yeah. How about you?
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much for this wonderful reading and just this whole engaging drawing thing and talking with us. It's such a fun and
Did you
exciting.
Did you draw a cassowary?
I did not.
You still have till 5 p.m. tomorrow, so I encourage you, just Google cassowary and you got to watch how a cassowary is walking, and I think you'll be inspired to want to draw it.
Okay, I will do so. I guess my question was, what is some advice you would give to an emerging poet, someone about to graduate from an MFA program who's looking into just the process of publication and just that whole side of the poetry world?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such a good question, McKenna. I wish there was one set answer for that. I will say two things. I was the most rejected poet I went to Ohio State for my MFA. I was the one who had collected, at the time, I'm going to sound so ancient, but we would get rejection letters on little squares of paper, like snail mail back to us. So talk about not happy mail. That was the most depressing mail. We get a very slim envelope and then no written anything. It would just be a quarter sheet of paper saying thanks, but no thanks. Not even sometimes a thanks. So I absolutely, and we would collect them. My friends and I, we would collect them in shoe boxes, and I had the most amount of rejections. But I also say that I published the most out of anybody in my graduating class. And that's not a humble brag. That's saying, and I was absolutely not the most talented one from my class. I absolutely was not. I remember there was people that we would be in awe whenever they were up for workshop, I can't wait to see what so-and-so is going to bring in, or man, this poem's just going to blow my mind. How could I dare, make comments on it? That was not me. Nobody said that about my poems. But I will tell you that I never, ever gave up on even the most brutal rejections, the most times I'd say it would get the quickest no. I'd be okay. I just had that armadillo shell and was okay, this one was rejected. I'm gonna have the humility to take a look at it and say, does this need to wait a little bit? Do I need to revise? If the answer was no, I would send it back out again. But you have to have that humility to say, something is not quite right on that last stanza. I'm not even sure what I'm doing with this stanza. Let me just tuck it aside and let it fester and grow just a little bit more before I can do some trimming and editing, whatnot, that kind of thing. So you can actually re-see that poem. But honestly, the thing that kept me going is just never, it sounds so easy, and yet it's the hardest thing, because I will tell you, the people that I would say were the most talented, the ones that we were the most in awe of, they all stopped writing. And after they would get, they stopped writing after they would get rejections from the Paris Review, the New Yorker. And it's like, what? Those are the top. I love their moxie that they would aim so high, but that's like the peak, the peak, the peak, the peak. So and it's such a shame, and I'm not going to judge anybody. We all had to go our different paths. But if I stopped the first time somebody rejected me, I mean, that would have literally been 1997. I would have never written anything again, So, and at the same time, I was also humble enough to know, so I came to my MFA late. Like, I didn't know there was a living poet until my junior year in college. So in class, in workshop, someone would mention like, this reminds me of a Philip Levine poem, the way he does XYZ. And I'd be like, oh yes, Philip Levine. All right. And I was kind of writing that down because I was like, I have no idea who Philip Levine is. And I did not take that as like, oh, I'm a loser. It was the next time people were like, Aimee, we're going to whatever bar, there's a party. I'd be like, okay, I'll be there. I'll see you, like, I'll be there in an hour. I would also take myself up to the library, look up everything I can get my hands on Philip Levine or Lucille Clifton or whoever else was mentioned in class, and I would do the work. So you have to also be humble enough to say when you don't know something that people are talking about. And that was like, I don't know, one of the things that the MFA gave me was that hunger to want to learn and to be part of that greater conversation. And I basically have never left workshop. And my students now are teaching me so much. They'll mention somebody, hey, did you see this new poem? It's in something called Waxwing. And I'll be like, look up Waxwing later. And that's on me. I will look that up. I'm a full professor now. I don't want to ever get to a place where I say, that's it. I've learned everything there is to know. The only time I want to say that is when I have no more pulse in my veins. You know what I mean? Like, I always want to learn something. I think if you do that, McKenna, I think I'm not going to promise publication. I can't promise publication, but I think you will always be a curious learner. And to me, those are the most interesting people, and therefore they become the most interesting writers. So my hope is that it's easy to say, don't worry about publications, don't worry about publications. I've been there. Just try to put that armadillo shell on and try to continue to be curious about this planet. And I think you won't go wrong. So.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. People are like, should I get a website? Should I get a platform? Build my platform? I'm like, what are you doing? You need to just read, learn about a cassowary, figure out. If you can't name 3 clouds and you're asking me about what platform you should develop on social media, that's on you. I guarantee you're not going to be publishing anything. You know what I mean? Like, so again, priorities. The best way to be a great writer is to be a great learner. And by that, just like, and it's free. You guys have the internet. When I was in college, the internet was still crackling and dial up, and, so learn all you can. Go back to that kid who would say, look, wow, look at this. Try to go back to that kid who was excited to learn, and I think you won't go wrong.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I know we're getting late, and it's much later where you are, Aimee. So we so appreciate all of your time and your grace.
I'm a night owl, so this is all good. If this was 10 in the morning my time, this would not be a good scene.
Perfect. Well, I think we just had one more question from Jasmine.
Good. Hi, Jasmine.
Hello.
I love your background, by the way.
Thank you. It's San Diego State.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, yes. Actually, I do remember that bridge. Yeah. Good. Okay.
My room's a mess. But I read your book, World of Wonders, and I really loved it. I'm a huge nature lover, so this really resonated. And it was a really nice positive change out of everything that happened in the last year. It was very warm and lyrical, and I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you so much, Jasmine.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
My question for you was, so you had, I want to find the line that I had. You had a line which was in reference to like the pick-me-nots, which was how I wish I could fold inward and shut down and shake off predators with one touch. And that made me sort of wonder about like, you know, how you sort of connect life, like not necessarily maybe your personal life, but just life in general and what happens around us with nature and, you know, comparing it to these things. And it made me wonder what sort of came first in your writing process. Did you have an experience and you're like, oh, this reminds me of this flower, or were you writing about this sort of an animal or creature and then that experience came afterward?
That's such a good question. That's such a good, I could tell you're a really interesting writer to even have that discernment to ask that question. So great. You know, I will say, so it's different. When I write a poem, I start with an image always. And an image for me is anything of the five senses. So it could be a sound, a smell that I want to recapture, a sight, anything like that. And then I kind of write towards it and see what's going on, you know. Maybe I'll write about the turtles and the koi from the San Diego State pond, you know, but the poem won't be about that. I'll be starting with that image. And then who knows, maybe I'll remember a moment at the zoo with my mom, you know, that kind of, and then it turns into a missing my mom poem, you know, that kind of thing. That's how my process works. I'm really condensing that down, but that's generally how my poetry process works. When I wrote the things for World of Wonder, I always started with a question. And those questions for me weren't always answered in the essay, but I was writing towards answering those questions, if that makes sense. So for that one in particular, I was writing about like, what are the situations where I don't feel safe? So that's what I was kind of thinking about first, but then I was like, what metaphor can I use to how I feel? And it didn't come, ironically, from the animal world. It came from this plant that I remembered that grows like a weed in Kerala, India. But, you know, you could see it in the Chicago Botanical Gardens, Buffalo Botanical Gardens, where this plant, it's called the touch-me-not, it folds in when you touch it, and it's to shake off predators. So if there's a bug that's going to eat its blossoms, it'll fold inward and the bug completely falls off, and it takes forever to crawl back up the, you know, there again. It's really kind of amazing. And I just thought, I don't know, I guess that's kind of how I think that's how I've always been thinking as a kid in the library, is when I was trying to make sense of this world, I turned to the vocabulary of plants and animals to find that language for me, because I certainly wasn't finding it in books. I certainly wasn't finding it on TV and movies. And the metaphors I was making in my mind, I wasn't writing essays as a 7-year-old, but the metaphors I was making in my mind was like, oh, I feel like that. When everybody turns to look at me and makes fun of my last name, I feel like if I put my hand in a volcano or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. Because nobody was, I couldn't see my feelings anywhere in books or even acknowledge that I even exist anywhere else. So yeah, so it's almost always I was writing towards, and one of the questions that came up is, I know there was a talk where there was some very salty person in the audience was like, I thought this was going to be all about nature. Why do you have to make this about race? And I was like, okay, I was called I, you know, could be in the grocery store and someone will be like, excuse me, my husband and I have a question. Are you Aztec? You know, and I feel like saying, okay, yep, you got me. The last living Aztec on the planet is here in Mississippi. I'm selecting avocados right now, you know. I'm just minding my business and I'll get a tap on the shoulder. What are you? You know, that kind of thing. Or how exotic you look. You must be Portuguese. Someone insisting that I'm Portuguese. And I'm like, no, my dad's from India. No, you're definitely Portuguese. And I was like, no, I promise you, we have full on Indian blood on my side. No, definitely Portuguese. And then they'd start talking to me in Portuguese and I'd be like, yep, doesn't sound familiar. And they're like, but it's your ancestral language. Like they're trying to tell me what I'm, or I'll win a prize. And they're like, you just got it because your last name. Or, you know, as a 7-year-old, I was called the N-word. And then someone has the gall to say, why are you making it about race? I want to say, like, you all made it about race. You know what I mean? I was just a little girl who loved to listen and chat with birds. And you all were the ones who made it about race, who made fun of my parents' accents, who followed me home when I was coming home from work, who asked me if I knew the Kama Sutra, who, I mean, all the kind of things that you can imagine. They made it about race, and they're the first ones to say, why do you have to include race when you're talking about nature? To me, they're inextricable, and we should be talking about race. Anybody who says they're separate, that's a privilege that I simply don't have. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lot of ew in there. Anna, I can tell you stories, but I won't. But yeah, it's just, I could be minding my own business and then someone else will make it about race. So how dare I write about it? To me, that's just like it's just a non-question for me to consider. That means that I'm supposed to be caring. I'm supposed to be making sure nobody feels uncomfortable, even though I had 40 years of being made uncomfortable. And I was born in Chicago. I had 40 years of witnessing my parents who love this country so much, who've worked for white people all their life in helping them breathe and helping them with their mental problems. I've had 40 years of watching them be made fun of and called all kinds of names, that kind of thing. Darn straight, I'm going to be making it about race. To me, they're inextricable. I cannot write about my childhood and the outdoors without writing about race. And my white husband also does the same. So I think we should be making it about race as well. We should be at least acknowledging it exists. Yeah, such a good question, Jasmine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Aimee, again, for such insightful answers. And so I think if we could end with one final thing, as a writer who is, I feel, so adept at the practice of wonderment and astonishment, and I feel like it really is a practice to sort of welcome that into your life and your writing. I'm wondering if, Aimee, you could maybe give us a few tips for how we can encourage more awe, more wonder, more astonishment in our own lives and our own writing.
Yeah, I look to my boys are in middle school now, so they would be mortified. They're asleep, but they would be mortified that I even mentioned them at all. But anybody who's even had a younger sister, or even just remembers what it was like to have a kid, to be a kid, when you're outside, I don't know about you all, but I used to just fill my pockets with all kinds of stuff. If I was on walks, I'd be like, oh, there's a pink rock. It looks like a heart. I'll put that in my pocket. Or there's an acorn, or there's a leaf that's shaped like a bear. I put that in my pocket. My Filipino mom would get so mad. First, she'd be like, you're not being a lady. Stop, putting things in your pocket. Why is there so dirty? Stuff like that. All that if she had her way, I'd be in dresses all the time. And sometimes I would forget to empty my pockets, so she would be mad that she's washing all these items from my walks. I would just say, and I saw lots of nodding in the audience, to that, sometime around middle school is when the pockets start becoming empty. When you don't feel awe-inspired by just the shape of a rock, the curl of a leaf into a curlicue. I don't know why that is. I don't know. Maybe it's not true for you. Maybe you're still that person who still has full pockets of rocks. But my hope is that, again, start small. It could be, and it all goes back to kind of that learning thing, is if you feel like, oh, I'm not anti-screen, but if you feel like you're spending a lot of time on the screen, or you just feel like the news is terrible, how do I get excited about anything? The root word of the word wonder is the same as the root word of the word smile. So go back to that original question. What do you love? What makes you smile? And just be an expert in it. if pink rocks make you smile, learn all the pink minerals there is. Be a mini geologist, from the comfort of your own home on the couch, instead of just staring with your mouth open at Netflix. Learn everything you can about clouds. How do you make rain? Do you know how a rainbow is formed? I know we see it all the time, but do you know how it's formed? Go back to but you have to, it's going to be different for each person. What is it that makes you smile? That is almost going to be the same answer as to something that'll keep that wonder alive. Because I feel like when wonder, and it's going to be hard this year. Oh my gosh, my family will be the first person to tell you. There were many days I just wanted to throw a blanket over my head and say, feed yourself. I'm not talking to anybody. I just, I can't deal with the news today. But I find that when wonder is a habit, even on the hardest days, meaning you're learning something that makes you smile, when wonder is a habit, love is the reflex. And it becomes contagious and contagious and contagious. When wonder is a habit, love becomes the reflex, meaning you'll want to share that with somebody else. If you live alone, you'll find a way the next FaceTime chat or the next text. Did you know there is a garnet, a type of garnet that only gets harvested by ants? It's called an ant garnet, and that is a true thing. And they're tiny, and I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but they're tiny. They're like half the size of a pencil eraser. They only surface on this planet when an ant, for whatever reason, ants find them. They don't like them, and they put them in a neat pile outside of their ant holes. And if you're lucky enough to find it, it's usually in Arizona. If you're lucky enough to find it, you have a whole pile of garnets. I've never written about it. I don't know if I ever will, but that makes me smile. And I wanted to dig and dig and dig on why that's happened, no pun intended. I wanted to figure out why do ants do that? Why just garnets? Why are they not finding me diamonds or opals or anything else? What is it about garnets? And here's a bonus. You can find them from people selling them on Etsy or eBay. There's geologists that love to just share this. This is one of the geologists' favorite things to share with non-geologists. And you can buy them for $1. How amazing it is to get a garnet in the mail that was brought up to the surface of this earth by an ant. And what a Valentine that is to give to someone, not on Valentine's Day or just any day, just to say, hey, I'm thinking about you, tape it to a piece of paper, send that to someone. You will get a date instantly. You will be friends for life with someone. I promise you. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's kind of a big answer to your question, Megan, but ant garnets. Oh my gosh, look that up. It's the best thing that you can do with $1 for my money. And I think we all have a subject like that will not forget the evil in this world, and there's lots of it, but it will help you just crack open towards goodness and light and make you feel a little more tender towards those ants. Is anything harming those ants? I hope not. I want to protect those ants that are doing this miraculous thing. Yes, actually, James Thomas Stevens was one of my former coworkers. And we've had conversations about that. Actually, he is the first one to give me an ant, and I'm like friends for life now. So Marissa, I forget, did you say you're in Santa Fe? Are you in New Mexico? How do you know James Thomas Stevens? What a small world out there. Anyway, Albuquerque, yes, oh my goodness. Yes, I when I last visited him, he was I knew about ant garnets before, but he's the first person who actually showed me what one looked like. Yes, so there you go. That's a real thing. The wacky poet's not making this up. It's a real thing. Best thing you can do with $1, go for it. And I just defy you to not smile with that knowledge. I'm looking here. There's literally nobody here who's not smiling. So I'm not saying ignore the news. Be active in whatever way you want to with responding to the news, but also, to me, despair and wonder and love and fear, they all go hand in hand. And I think it's a mistake to try to separate them both. You can only have wonder in one day or have despair. I think they go both. And I think that's when you, honestly, that's when we know that we're human, you know, and we're not a zombie that is wanting to make us and only us great and not focus on anything else in the world. So I would just say, listen to nature for ways to tell you how to live. Don't listen to me, listen to nature.
I think I want to listen to you too, Aimee. I could listen to you talk all night. I mean, just sort of such a feast of gems that you have given us. I mean, we have writing prompts. We did some drawings. We've got great resources in the chat. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's all please thank Aimee for her time tonight, for a beautiful, beautiful reading.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hang on one second here. All right, hang on one second. Before you leave. Okay, I wanted to show you that these do exist. These are the ant garnets. I'm not sure if you can see. Oops, I'm dropping them all over the place. I bought these. I found the geologist. He was like doing a fire sale of them. See how tiny they are? I bought one of these from last year, and then I just bought a bunch for myself because they make me happy. I bought these and I sent them all to my students once we found out we were going into a pandemic, so that they know that they're not alone, that ants are thinking of them, I'm thinking of them. And honestly, I think that was just such a that was like, it wasn't any syllabus, it wasn't any moment, it was just to show a little bit of the natural world, something to lift them out of despair. And many of them were terrified, didn't know what was going to happen, when they would be able to go home. And it was like I got them in like a little bulk thing, less than $1 a piece. So there's so much out there that's not involved with a screen, just going back to connecting with people. I think that is going to fortify you just as much as it is the people that you're reaching out to. So anyway, now there's going to be no more ant garnets around, because everybody from San Diego is going to be buying them up. But I tell you, I mean, I don't want to keep this to me. It's too good to keep it to myself. And that's what I mean by that practice of wonder. You will want to share it with other people, and that in turn makes you feel a little bit tender, a little bit more vulnerable. And that, I hope, makes that person feel a little bit more tender, a little bit more vulnerable. And that's what I want to spread. We've had so much hate in this country for the last 4 years in particular. Let's see if we can spread a little bit more wonder.
Yes, I think everybody needs to find their own little garnet that they want to spread.
Yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you again so much, Aimee. This has really been, I mean, the most enjoyable Wednesday evening.
Oh, thank you.
Your efforts. And thank you all as well for your wonderful questions and for being here, for your great comments in the chat. And we will see you again in a few weeks for our next event. And, you know, get home safely. I'm going to keep the Zoom open for a minute so we won't go to like complete blackout.
It's always the most depressing thing when it's just like, boom.
I know, yes, but I will stop.